word on Edgeways hosting our worldwide story round. So everyone here is welcome to tell or listen or do just be with us. But I say no more. I hand over to Mike, who will be our host for the next however long it takes. We are open-ended.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening. Welcome to you all here. I'm sat here in the UK. If you're not in England or Scotland or Wales or the Irish and Irish Isles, as we say now, so it's the British and Irish Isles is the expression we use nowadays. Well, I'm about halfway up on the English side between here and the Welsh border. This afternoon, because it's been a lovely day here, I took my dog for a walk on the Wenlock Edge and I could see Wales. So I'm that close to Wales. And I go there a lot and it's a lovely place. We only ever fall out when it comes to do with rugby union, which is a football game that we play on these islands sometimes. Right. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to ask Keith to go first, but I haven't mentioned it to him. I'll give him a couple of minutes to think about it all. Yep. And then Diana, and then we'll take it from there. It's a story round, so if you want to tell a story, you're very welcome to. If you don't want to tell a story, God only gave us one tongue, but he gave us two ears. So if you want to listen instead of speak, you'll be very welcome to. And my friend John Rowe, you're going to do some poetry tonight, John? Are you telling stories or what?
I'll do a few poems.
You do a few poems.
If I might.
Okay, good. That sounds good to me. If you go, well, I'll tell you what. If I can find the rest of it, you do one poem, and I've got another one to do afterwards. How about that? We'll get started with that, and Keith, we'll go to you next. Okay?
Okay, that's fine.
John, have you got a poem you can kick off with?
Oh, you want one to start with, do you?
Yeah.
Well, I'll do one. It won't take me 2 seconds to get it. There I go, and it's a poem I wrote about my place in Romania when I first got there. But my brother-in-law likes this one, so just first impressions of Kolobica. It's the green.
Mike.
Am I?
Mike.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Mike?
I'm here. Yes, I can hear you. That's Lucy.
Yes, my camera is not working. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Right, can you hear us all,
I can
Lucy?
still tell a story, but
You can hear us okay?
Yeah, I can tell a story, but I don't have a camera.
Right, well, you're on the list, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, so John, back to you.
So, Kolobica, first impressions. This is, I first got to this mountain 7 years ago, and this is what I wrote straight away. It's the greens and the way the forest folds, the rocky outcrops, graduations of grey and dark conifers vying for supremacy against their darker cousins, that gives this mountain home its balance. And here at Easter, the chanting precedes the bell, calling a village to prayer, and godless though I am, it makes sense to thank someone for all this.
Right, so not to be outdone by Mr. Rowe, I'm going to do a poem and then we're going to go over to Keith, okay? So this is my poem to kick us off today. Faith is cool, but so is spring. Spring is cool, but so is faith. Praying to God for spring has been this year a thing of faith. The wildflowers are here just. Faith is always here, mostly. The wildflowers cheer me up. My faith in them my faith is in them coming every year. The spring is springing, the cuckoo coos. The spring is the start of the summer. Faith sustains me through the winter. Spring is springing. Spring is here. Right, so we'll go to some proper storytelling now. So we'll go to Keith. And then afterwards, we're going to Diana, and then Polly, you are on the list next. But I can't see you. So we'll take it from there. So Keith first and then Diana. Okay.
Well, hello, everybody. Now, although I'm from Lincolnshire in the UK, I do still tell stories from all over the world, and this is one which is definitely not Lincolnshire or UK. There was once a young boy. He was an Iroquois boy, and he could neither run or jump like the other boys and girls. And so they made fun of him. And he was very lonely and very sad. And his father and mother had died some time ago, and is looked after by an uncle who was very mean. And so he was very, very sad and unhappy. His name was Feathertoes. And one of the things that he loved to do to cheer himself up was to look up into the sky and see all the birds flying around high in the sky. And he dreamed that maybe he could fly. And one day, a lot of the boys and girls of his own age, they were just making fun of him, and he was very sad, and he ran away from home. And he ran and he came to a tree, and he climbed up the top of a tree, and he rested at the top of the tree, the top branch. But then the wind began to blow. And it blew and blew and blew and blew, harder and harder and harder and harder. And it shook the tree and shook the branch. And Feathertoes, he fell out of the tree. And he put out his arms, and to his delight, he found that he could fly. And he flew around the sky just like one of the birds. Ah, his dream had come true. He could fly. But then the wind, it blew and blew and blew, and harder and harder and harder, and blew for miles and miles and miles, until he came to a cliff face, and he landed on a ledge. And the wind died down, and he rested there. And he fell asleep. And in the morning, he heard a voice. "Feed me! Feed me!" And he looked down, and there, beside the river, in the rock, there was a face of a man, a huge man. It was the Rock Man. And Feathertoes, he scrambled around, and he found some berries on a bush, and he threw them over the ledge down to the Rock Man. And the Rock Man said, "Feathertoes, come down to me." And so Feathertoes, he stepped over the ledge, put out his arms, he flew down to the Rock Man. The Rock Man said, "I know that you can't run and jump like the other boys, but you are a special Iroquois boy because you have ears to hear. And I'm going to tell you some stories, and you can become a famous storyteller." And the Rock Man told him some stories. And every day Feathertoes, he would fly from the ledge down to the Rock Man, and the Rock Man would tell him stories. So at night he was on the ledge asleep, and at night and during the day he would come down, and the Rock Man would tell him stories. Now, one morning he woke up, and he was very, very, very cold. Oh, and he looked down and saw that the Rock Man was covered with ice and snow. And he knew that there wouldn't be any more stories until the springtime. And he also found that he couldn't fly anymore. And so he climbed up the cliff face, and he went on his way, looking for somewhere to stay for the winter. And he came to a tree. He couldn't find anywhere to stay, and he rested beside the tree, and he heard a growl. Oh, oh. And the Feather Toes thought, it's a panther. Perhaps it's the one that's been eating people out of my village. And Feather Toes, he climbed up the tree. He didn't know what else to do. He knew that the panther could climb trees better than him, but he didn't know what to do. And by that time, the panther had got his scent. And the panther rushed to the base of the tree and started to climb, putting out his paw and his claws and started to climb up the tree. And Feather Toes at the top of the tree didn't know what to do. He didn't have a knife. He couldn't defend himself. He didn't know what to do. And then he remembered a story that the Rockman had told him. And he looked down and said, Mr. Panther, in order to climb up the tree, I will come down because I've always wanted to be eaten by a panther. And the panther thought, well, that's very strange. You've been spoken to in this way. It's very strange. And he said, and Feather Toes said, by the way, did you eat my father? And the panther thought, no, shook his head. Well, perhaps it was your father, or maybe your uncle that ate my father. Would you like to know just what happened? And the panther sat down and thought, well, I'd better find out what's this all about. And Feather Toes said to the panther, well, my father is a wizard, and I am a wizard. And one day, my father was walking along, minding his own business, and he met your father. And your father said, I'll eat this man. And my father said, oh, that's very interesting. Well, perhaps it might be good to be eaten by a panther. And so, as your father opened his mouth, my father transformed himself, said magic words, and transformed himself to the size of a pea, and jumped into your father's mouth and went down his throat into his stomach. And because winter was coming on, my father was very happy in your father's stomach because it's nice and warm in there. He made a nice nest, and he was very happy there. But your father was still very, very hungry. And so he went searching and hunting and caught a rabbit and swallowed the rabbit. And my father was delighted because not only did he have a warm place to spend the winter, but he also had food being delivered as well. And so he skinned the rabbit and he built a small fire and he roasted the rabbit and ate it. Now, your father was still very hungry and he was getting very hot. And smoke was coming out of his nose and out of his ears. And he rushed over to a lake and he drank lots of water from the lake and swallowed it all down his throat into his stomach. But my father simply built a boat and he just rowed around in your father's stomach on the water. And so he spent the winter there. He was very happy. And it came to the time, it was time to leave, and my father sent some magic words, and your father opened his mouth, and my father jumped out and went on his way. Now, in due time, my father met my mother, and they fell in love, and they were married. And they were very happy together, but winter was coming on. And as they were walking along, they met your father. And my father said to my mother, oh, our troubles are over. We can spend the winter now in a nice warm place. And said to your father, open your mouth. No, I'm not opening my mouth. No. Open your mouth, said my father to your father. No, I'm not going to open my mouth. I'm not going to open my mouth. My father said the magic words, and your father opened his mouth, and my father and my mother transformed themselves into size of a pea and went down into your father's stomach, where they spent the winter very happy. Now, I would have been born in your father's stomach, but my mother wanted to live somewhere where there was a garden. And so they said the magic words, and your father opened his mouth, and they came out and went on their way. And so, Mr. Panther, if you're ready, I'll come down now, and I'd love to be eaten by you. And very bravely, Feather-Toasty climbed down the tree. But when he got to the base of the tree, he found that the panther was nowhere to be seen. Much to his relief, he was safe. And Feather-Toasty went on his way, and he came to a village. And all the villagers, they welcomed him. They said, "Who are you? What's your name?" He said, "My name is Feather-Toes, and I'm a storyteller." "Oh, a storyteller." "Oh," and they gave him a place to live, and they gave him lots of food. And all the way through that winter, he told them stories until the spring. And that's the story of Feather-Toes, the famous storyteller who was an Iroquois boy.
Well, that was lovely, John. And where did you say that came from?
I couldn't find a written version, but I got it from Tim Bowley on one of his recordings. But that's the only
Tim Bowley.
Tim
Whoa.
Bowley, yeah. That's the
We're
only
going
place I
back a
could
long
find it.
time now, mate.
Yeah, I couldn't find a written version of it anywhere, so it's just from what he said or told on a recording. So
Wow.
I've learned it from there. So there you go.
Well done, well done. Yeah, that's fair play. I haven't heard Tim's name for an awful long time. Really nice chap he was. Yeah, absolutely. Right, so we're going to go to Diana next. And then I had Polly on, but Polly seems to have disappeared off my screen. So then I'm going to go to Moria, if that's all right with you, Moria. Are you going to tell a story tonight?
I thought, well, I can give it a try if that's okay for you.
Absolutely.
I was counting just on listening to you.
Oh, no, I don't want to force you, but you are here,
No.
so I've got to give you the option.
Oh,
that's all.
you're not. I try to be as courageous as that little boy in your story, Keith. And I just learned that storytelling is always good for something, and if it's only to escape a tiger's jaw. Okay.
Well, we'll let Diana get on and see where we go from there. Okay, so if you mute yourself again, we'll go over to Diana. Diana from the Highlands, where Stanley Robinson said all the women are the most beautiful women in all the world.
Sorry, I didn't understand you now. Could you
mute yourself so Diana can tell her story, and you will be next. Okay.
Hi there. Right. Okay, the story that I've got to tell you is set quite a wee while ago, when circuses were a big thing, especially in Russia. And at that time, animals were still involved in the actual circus events. Now, there was the Flying Chernevskys. They were amazing. They had a worldwide fame because they were so particular on that trapeze. The timing, everything was always perfect. And this was Boris Chernevsky's father and mother. Now, he didn't go into the trapeze. In fact, in some ways, he thought he didn't really fit into the circus life at all. But he was considered to be a very good juggler. And his uncle was the second best, most important juggler in the whole wide world. What better recommendation could there be? Now, there had been a big performance the night before, and his uncle Misha, he was the ringmaster. And so he'd practiced his juggling. And do you know, when it came to his turn, it all went wrong. And the batons fell and crashed, And quickly, Uncle Misha came out and he told them that some other act would be coming on quickly to try and get over the problem. But Boris was so downhearted. And at the end of the show, Uncle Misha made it so clear that he was so disappointed at his performance. And how could he be so idiotic? And he used swear words that he never knew existed. Well, that Boris never knew existed. And it was so evident that everyone thought he had just totally messed up. But why? Why? Surely he practiced. Well, there was no comfort in being near his family, either his father and mother or his uncle at that time. So he went off. And it took some time for him to get to sleep that night, but he did get to sleep eventually. And when he woke up in the morning, it was a strange sensation. He felt that his right hand was a little bit slower than his left, and that his left foot was a little bit slower than his right foot. And this was really quite odd. And then he remembered about the night before. The night before, when everything had gone wrong and his uncle had shouted at him and his parents had looked so distraught. Well, he didn't like remembering it, but he couldn't get away from it. And he got up. He thought about having something to eat, but then he decided he would just tidy up his trailer a bit. When he heard a strange voice, and he couldn't work out where it was coming from. And well, the trailer wasn't very big, so he had to find it. And sometimes the little people in the circus would hide themselves in some of the trailers, particularly in Boris's, because he was so easy to torment and to wind up. But it wasn't them. He couldn't find them anywhere. And then he started thinking to himself, it must be in the hands. For a juggler, it must be in the hands. But he wasn't entirely sure. And his father would say, well, the eyes and the ears, the timing, the sight, it's that kind of combination that makes a wonderful juggler. And his Uncle Misha would agree. But Boris wasn't sure. Maybe it was in the hands. And he didn't actually realize, but he started speaking out loud. There was no one else in the trailer. But then, as he turned round and looked over, there he saw a strange apparition forming in front of his eyes. Quite a tall woman with long grey hair, and she had her back to him. But then she turned round and she had a wen on her chin. And she professed to be Baba Yaga. But that didn't ring any bells with Boris. Baba Yaga? She said, yes, surely you know Baba Yaga. Russia, folklore, magic, spells, shape-shifting. Well, and she said to him, so it's in the hands. And he held up his hands. Yes. Would you like some different hands, she said. Different hands? What do you mean? He said, well, we can go and I have hands. You can try different ones on and see how they fit. And maybe they'll be better at juggling. And maybe they won't make you drop the pattern so easily. He was intrigued with this. And she waited for his answer. And then she shouted, come on, are we going for your hands? And Uncle Misha was in the next trailer and he could hear the shouting. And so Boris tried to push her out the front door just to get away, just so that he didn't make a noise and waken up anyone. And there outside was the strangest thing. It looked like a large, gigantic mug, porcelain or something like that. But it had a rudder in it. And Boris was fascinated by this because he knew all about how things work and he always showed a keen interest in anything like that. So he looked all around it, underneath, down the sides. He couldn't find out what was making the noise, the engine. Well, he went to get closer to this mug, and by now Baba Yaga is in it. And he just sort of crashed into it and fell in, and very ungracefully. And when he got in to this huge mug, he started checking it out to see if there was anything inside that would make this engine go, make it move. But then it was off, and it was off, and it was up, and it was up, and it was way up high. And he looked back at the circus, and all he could see was a little dot. And then it took off, and it went over the forests and over rivers, and eventually came to a small wood where there was a clearing. And it came down and down and down and down, and it landed. And Baba Yaga was out quickly. And Boris came behind her, and he looked ahead, and he saw what he thought he saw was this ginormous bird, but sort of square shaped, with long thin legs that were moving. And he thought, what could this be? Is it really a bird? But as it got nearer, he could see it wasn't a bird at all. It was a hut. And when it got near to Baba Yaga, the legs concertinaed down, and it gave a slight bow to Baba Yaga. And then, as soon as it was down, the steps up she went, and Boris followed. And inside it was crazy. It was all cupboards and storage. And he'd never seen anything like it. And she had places where newt and tongue of adder, or the poison from a spider, something like that. All these little cabinets where she kept things. And then in another corner, she had drawers. The top one said heads, then hands, then eyes, then ears, then feet. And she slowly opened the top one and pulled out the hands. And she said to him, "What would you like?" She handed him over these pair of hands, and he put them on. And to begin with, they were a sort of dark custard yellow colour, but eventually, once they covered every small part of his hand, they were the same colour as his hands. And the strange thing was, when he looked up, there was Baba Yaga, and she was no longer an old woman. She had long blonde hair. She had a shape, a very curvy shape. And here he was with his hands. He was sort of drawn towards her, especially all the curves, for he was an artist. With these hands on, he could sculpt. The things he could do with these hands. He felt it, he knew it. And he was drawn towards her. But as he got closer, he remembered who she was. He remembered that this was Baba Yaga, the shapeshifter. She wasn't really this young woman after all. And so he retreated and ripped off one glove or one hand. So then she gave him some different ones. And he looked at the ticket on them, and it said, surgeon's hand. And once he had them on, they again looked like his skin. And they were so dexterous, and they could move around, and they were so precise, and they always wanted to be moving, to be doing things. And he noticed the wen on her chin. And he said that he could go over, he could do something about that, and he touched it. And he said, yes, it would be so easy for me to rectify that. But she said, no, this is my guise as Baba Yaga. You must leave me alone. And so he took off the surgeon's hands, and he looked at his own. And well, he wasn't sure. It was a relief to see them in front of him, and not the artist's hands or the surgeon's hands, because it made him feel like he was real again, even though he'd always been real, and it was everything else that was perhaps surreal. It just depends how you look at it. But anyway, he thought to himself after some time, maybe it wasn't in the hands. maybe it wasn't in the hands. And this was a big thought for him to think, because he'd been so sure, even when Uncle Misha and his parents had thought that it was maybe the eyes and the ears, because after all, the hands are the daughters of the eyes and the ears. But the thing was, he'd been a bit clumsy that day as well. He'd fallen down the steps when he'd come out of the trailer. He'd kind of fallen into the big mug that they travelled in. He'd fallen over at least once or twice while they were there. And she said to him, "Are you sure it's not feet you want?" Well, he thought about this. And she said, "You know, I have Michael Flatley's feet. I have Michael Jackson's feet. I have the group diversity, their feet. Wouldn't you like that?" But he said no. He did ask, though, if they had soul. And she said, yes, they did have soul. But after that, he wasn't at all sure what really the problem was. And anyway, she put the hands back in the drawer and closed it. And it was time to go home to face the next day.
That was lovely, Diana. Absolutely lovely. It really was. Yeah, absolutely. Right, so I'm going to go to Moria next, and then I'm going to go to Lucy. So Moria, you're after Lucy. Lucy, you're after Moria. Sorry, I might get it right here. Okay, so Moria, you're next. Okay, so you unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. There once were 3 men traveling together in one of the Oriental countries, a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew, and they had become good friends. They walked all day through the desert, through towns, along rivers, and at night they were looking for an inn to stay, the 3 of them together. So one night they had found a guest house, made themselves comfortable, when there was a knock at the door. The Muslim opened the door and saw a plate full of halwa standing there. So I don't know whether you all know halwa. It's an Oriental sweet made of sesame seeds and tons of sugar, very dangerous stuff. So the Muslim saw this plate of halwa and he wanted to try it right away. But then the Jew said, no, we should really distribute it fairly among the 3 of us. They are irregular pieces, so we have to weigh them first of all and then divide it by 3. And the Christian guy said, well, why divide it? It's a pity. I have a suggestion, let the Almighty decide. So whoever has the most fascinating, most extraordinary dream tonight, he shall have the whole of the halwa. So the other 2 agreed a little bit reluctantly, and they were very tired from the day's walk and went to sleep. And in the morning, when the first rays of sun woke them up, they told themselves, each other, the dreams while they were still in bed. And the Jewish companion started and he said, you won't believe what kind of a dream I had. I was caught in a terrible sandstorm. I couldn't see the hand in front of my eyes and thought I was lost. When suddenly I saw these beautiful golden Hebrew letters in front of my eyes, and the sand cleared away. I saw Moses, our teacher Moses, standing there with the tablets of the law, and I realized I was standing on Mount Sinai, and the stone tablets turned into angels who took me up to a heaven of such bliss that it's impossible to describe it to you. The Muslim said, oh, well, this dream is certainly deserving of the halwa. This will be hard to surpass. But shouldn't we listen to our Christian friend too? I suppose you've dreamt of your Lord Jesus. Oh, yes, you're right, said the Christian guide. I dreamt of Jesus, and he came and saved me when I was in the most terrible need of all. I was standing in front of the last court of judgment, and because of my former sins, I was sentenced to burn in hell forever. But Jesus stood in front of me, he spread his arms, he spoke for me so that I wasn't condemned to hell, but only to the cleaning flames of purgatory. And he started to describe the tortures and pains and punishments of purgatory in the most vivid colors, so that the Jew shook himself and the Muslim said, oh, well, this is a very interesting dream too, certainly deserving of the halwa. Do you want to hear my dream after all? Do you want to hear it at all? And the two other men said, well, yes, of course, because they supposed that the Muslim would tell in flowery words about the Islamic paradise, full of beautiful gardens with colorful flowers and wonderful marble fountains with fresh waters. And most important of all, of beautiful, dark-eyed virgins waiting for the faithful. But the Muslim was very short. He said, well, I dreamt of my prophet Muhammad. And he said, eat the halwa. And of course, I refused. I said, no, it would be more fair to split it with the others. And the prophet replied, who do you want to share the halwa with? One of them is in heaven, the other is in purgatory, and from both places, nobody ever returns to earth. So go ahead and eat the halwa before it gets dry. And who am I to disobey the prophet? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome to be here. Can I ask you, it says Moria Munich. Are you in the city of Munich, or was that your
I
surname?
am, yes, I am.
So
And
how many languages do you speak? You speak English very well, and you speak German.
These are the languages which I speak best, and a bit of Hebrew and Italian and so on, but not well enough to tell stories. So I'm very grateful for the occasion. And I see Mike, whom I met at other in the US at other Zoom meetings. So it's nice to see a familiar place. And you probably know Momo Heiss, right? Who was in Marrakesh. Yeah, she's also a storytelling friend of mine in Munich.
Right. Well,
So
you're very welcome to be here. And I would like to say your second language, for English is your second language. Your diction is very good. When you're telling stories in a different language, it's the clarity of the words that count. And you got 10 out of 10 for that. So well done.
Thank you very much.
And could you give Momo my regards?
I will. She told me of you, so your name was familiar already. Yeah, I tell her. Thank you all.
Okay, right. So Lucy, can you hear me? Lucy. Calling Lucy. No, I don't think she's having trouble tonight. She was here at the beginning. I have texted her in the chat and she hasn't answered. So if she comes back, we'll get her in then. So that will take us round to Stella. So Stella, who's texted me now. Stella, where are you from?
Hello, I'm from Greece.
From
I'm
Greece.
A storyteller from Greece. English,
Well,
of
we
course.
are having an election today. Aren't you standing for Parliament?
Yes, we did. We had election today.
Yeah, well, I know this because my friend Despina, who's a very
Oh, yeah.
yeah, she's counting all the votes. She told me
Oh,
earlier
really?
today she couldn't come. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to go from Stella, are you on the mainland or are you on an island?
I am in Thessaloniki, not in an island.
You are, sorry,
Thessaloniki, mainland.
the mainland. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay,
so
English is not my native language, so
how many languages do you speak?
I speak English and I speak Spanish. I have not ever tried to tell a story in Spanish, but in English I have some other times joined in international Zoom meetings, and I have told some stories in English. I would like to go to some festivals abroad, so I'm trying to my stories
you're
to make them.
You're talking to very good people if you want to go to festivals abroad, because there's John Rowe there, and we run a festival here in Much Wenlock. So we know all about festivals. So anyway, so I'm going to hand over to Stella, who is from Thessaloniki. Was that the right expression?
Thessaloniki.
Thessaloniki. That sounds like Welsh to me. That does, right. Okay.
Okay,
right,
that's great.
over to Stella. Thank you very much.
And about the festival. Okay, I will tell you a story about sorrow. The Greek word is kaimos. This word cannot be translated as many other words in other languages. The closest word is the sorrow. So, once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. They had a son, and they also had a daughter. Their daughter, the princess, had a nanny, and her nanny would always sigh and say, "Oh, what a sorrow." The girl asked her nanny, "What is sorrow?" "Oh, dear child of mine, never ask to learn about sorrow," would say the nanny, and nothing more. Coincidentally, one day, as they were talking, a man came down the princess' window, and he was shouting and proclaiming his wares. "I'm selling sorrow! I'm selling sorrow!" he said. "Oh, here," said the princess. "I'm getting downstairs to buy some sorrow." So she went to the man and asked him, "Where is the sorrow you sell?" And he gave her a small box, as small as a matchbox. The princess took the box, went upstairs, opened it, and found a tiny worm. "Look, Nanny," said, "what shall I do now? What shall I feed it?" "Dear child of mine," said the nanny, "feed it sugar." And the girl fed sugar to the worm, and the worm was fed and was fed and was fed and was growing and growing and growing until it became a beast. And one day, the beast ate her mother, ate her father, ate her brother. It's eating now the whole village. But it wouldn't eat the princess. So the whole village was devastated, and the princess left alone. So she took off and went to a distant forest. She found a tree. She climbed up there and stayed there. Under the tree, there was a fountain, and one day the king came there to water his horse. The horse went to drink, but it was scared when it saw the shadow of the girl, and the prince looked up and saw a beautiful woman. "Who are you?" asked her. "Are you a human or a ghost?" "I'm a human, just like you," said the girl. So the king told her, "Come on, get down. I'm gonna take you with me, and you will be my wife." So the girl went home with him. But when his mother, the old queen, saw the girl, asked her son, "Oh, my son, who is she? Where did you find her? If she is a wild one." "No, mother," said the king. "She is a good and beautiful woman, and I'm gonna marry her." So they got married. And after some times, as always happens in fairy tales, the princess got pregnant. But the king had a message to go to war. So before he leaves, says to his mother, "Mother, take good care of my woman and of the baby when it's born." And he left. And now is the time for the princess to give birth to her baby. She gives birth and she has a baby boy. She takes him to her arms. And the first day, the second day, she swings the baby. She sings for the baby to sleep. Άστραψεν η Ανατολή, κούνα παραμάνα το παιδί. Και βρόντισεν είδηση, κούνα το παιδί, μην τύχει και ξυπνήσει. But on the third day, a sound was heard. And the beast came into the room. "I am hungry," said. "Eat me," said the princess. "No, I will eat your child." And the beast opens up his mouth and swallows the baby. Next morning, her mother-in-law came into the room to take care of the girl and the baby, but what happened? I don't hear the baby crying. Where is the baby? "I was hungry," says the princess, "and I ate him." "Did you really eat your baby?" "Well, yes, I did it." The time passed, and the king returned from the war and asked his mother, "Oh, mother, how is my wife? How is my baby?" "My dear child," said the old queen, "your baby is dead." Well, what can we do? God bless my wife. And after some time, the princess got pregnant for the second time. And for the second time, the king had to go to the war. And again, the girl gives birth to a baby boy. And the first day, the second day passed, and here comes the third night. The beast is here again. "I am hungry. Eat me." "I shall eat your child," and swallows the second baby. Next morning, her mother-in-law came to see what was going on. She didn't find the baby again. So again, when the king returned from the war, asked her and said the same things. Oh, my dear child, your child is dead. Well, mom, what can we do? Now, the princess is pregnant for the third time, and for the third time, the king goes to war. She gives birth, and now, this third time, she has a baby girl, and she takes her to her arm. She swings. She sings for her baby to sleep. Ο καβαλάρης διάβηκε που να παραμάνα το παιδί καιρό βόλησε στη δύση κούνα το παιδί μην τύχει και ξυπνήσει. And now, Sorrow, the beast, comes again into the room for the third time. I am hungry. Eat me. No, I shall eat your child, and opens his mouth and swallows the baby. Next morning, her mother-in-law, when she saw that the baby wasn't there, asked her again, why did you do that? Why did you eat your child? That's it. I ate my child. This time, I will tell it to your husband. That's enough. I hid it for the first time. I hid it for the second. Now, I will tell you on your husband. So, when the king returned from the war, asked his mother, well, mother, how is my wife? How is my baby? My son, this woman you brought here is a wild one. Your babies didn't die. Your babies were eaten by their mother. As soon as the king heard this, went straight to his wife's room and told her, I don't want you to be my wife anymore. You ate our children. Get off and go back where you came from. So the princess got off the palace. She walked and walked and walked. She went back and forth until she reached a mountain. She climbed there and decided to stay there forever. Suddenly, the beast appears. Oh, Sorrow, you came again. I have nothing else to give you. Eat me to save me from my troubles. Oh no, said Sorrow, I will not eat you. Moreover, I will give you back your children, because for so many things I have done to you, you have not told on me. Take your children back, and her children get out of his mouth. And then Sorrow, the beast, says to the girl, the earth will split up and swallow me up. You will never see me again. Go to your husband, take your children, and live with him happily. And that happened. The princess took her children, went back to her husband, and told him her story from the beginning to end. For when he found her on the tree, he had never told him how she had been there. And then they lived happily ever after, and they are still living. Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you very much. That was lovely. Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's great. And I hope you'll come and visit with me again. We do this. We'll sort some dates out with John, but we used to be once a fortnight, but it's been a bit up and down because
Next one's on June the 4th.
June 4, okay. I would love to be.
right.
And I hope that my English were good enough to understand.
It's very, yes, it's very good. Your English
Okay.
was very good. That's fine. Right. So I'm
Okay.
going to go to Lucy now. Lucy, can you hear me? Lucy? Yeah,
Yes, I can hear
Right,
you.
and
Can
so-
you hear me?
I
Okay.
can, yes. After Lucy, it's going to be Melanie. Okay, so I can hear you, Lucy. Let's
Okay.
hope it all works for you. Okay.
Okay. Robot pets. I was born in Planet Pet, and we all had robot pets to keep us company. They were all types of pets. They could be dogs, cats, snakes, spiders, you name it, any pet. We love our pets because they were intelligent and they were also very affectionate. They would say things like, "How was your day? You're my best friend. Take me out today?" We also love our pets because they could be left home alone whilst we were working. We didn't have to worry about if they got sick or if they needed food. There were also in our planet normal pets, but these were reserved for working. These were reserved for farmers and the police and the army and emergency services. Little did we know that robot pets were also spies. Planet Pet had two main political parties, the Futuristic Party and the Stripes Party. The Futuristic Party was led by President Future. He had come to our planet because he wanted to convince us that the way forward was to get superpowers with genetic manipulation. Many people agreed with him, and he was able to get 5 million voters that kept voting for him every year, and he had been in power for many, many, many years. The leader of the Stripes Party was Mr. Joker, and he was a demon that had come from the Joker dimension. He came to our planet because he wanted to convince us that it's not the future that you have to think about, it's the present. You have to do things today, as soon as possible, because the future might never happen. But Mr. Joker hadn't been in power for many, many years. And he was very angry about it. He decided to feed all robot pets with spyware. And he made a list of all the people that were the voters of President Future. The 5 million of them. And then a few days later, those 5 million voters that voted for President Future disappear. It was in the news. 5 million people disappeared. We don't know where. We suspect robot pets has something to do with it, but we cannot prove it. They were all members of the Futuristic Party. So It was a mystery. But President Fuchsia decided that he was going to get to the bottom of this. He wanted his 5 million voters back. And he decided to take 24 robot pets that used to belong to the disappeared to Universe Technology to see if they could find out what was wrong. In Universe Technology, they checked the robot pets thoroughly, and they found spyware inside their brains, very well hidden, very secret, very difficult to detect. And the scientists in Universe Technology told President Fuchsia, this doesn't explain how 5 million people disappeared. President Fuchsia came back to our planet, now knowing what the problem was and who was guilty. He told his officials to get Mr. Joker and put him in a high security prison in Death Row. He was taken to court and found he was guilty of crimes against humanity. Whilst in prison, President Fuchsia decided to talk to Mr. Joker to see if he could tell him where the 5 million people were. And he said, you might as well tell me because you're going to die in death row. And Mr. Joker said, you will never find them. They are in the Joker dimension, in hell. At this point, Mr. President Fuchsia realized that he would have to bargain with Mr. Joker. And he said, what do you want? I want my 5 million voters back. And Mr. Joker said, my freedom. So it was agreed. President Fuchsia got his 5 million voters back in Planet Pet. And Mr. Joker had his freedom. Everybody was so happy. All these people now back with their families and their friends. And all robot pets. They had the spyware removed. And we were able to enjoy our pets again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you very much. Right. So I'm going to go to Melanie Ray now. So Melanie and I, well, we met 3 weeks ago when we were both young and beautiful.
What a good visit it was, too. I'm a great grandmother now, Mike.
Great grandmother.
Yeah, she's only.
Oh, you started young.
I did. So did my daughter. So I'd like to tell you a story from China. And I did have a friend of mine, a storyteller, who had lived in China a long time and researched a lot of stories, say that she doubted very much that this was actually a Chinese story, but might have been something that missionaries had brought. At any rate, I like the story. There was once a very wise old man who was a scholar and spent many, many hours solving various philosophical and mathematical and geographical problems. But there was one thing for which he had no answer, and it bothered him. He thought about people and how some people in some circumstances seem to be in heaven, and other people in the same circumstances seem to be in hell. They were not happy where the others were. And it puzzled him because the situation seemed to be pretty much the same. So he spent long hours thinking about this and writing about it. And one night, his head slowly fell toward the scroll he was writing on, and his writing hand stilled, and he drifted. And in that drift, he heard a voice say, "I can answer your question now if you're ready." He said, "Yes, I'm ready." And the whole room disappeared in a strange fog and then cleared again. And there he was looking at a huge dining room with lots and lots of big round tables and waiters moving around, bringing piles of wonderful looking food. And the voice said, "This is hell." And at first he couldn't see why. It looked fantastic and the food smelled good. And then he realized what he was looking at. All the people around those tables had chopsticks to eat with, but they were twice as long as their arm. They could not get the food to their mouths. Well, the vision faded away, and then the strange fog disappeared again, and he seemed to be in the same room. But when he looked closely, he saw that everyone was very happy in this place. And the voice said, "This is heaven." And then he saw why. Because everyone was using those long chopsticks to feed the people sitting across the table from them. And when he woke up the next morning, although he had a bit of ink on his cheek from lying on the scroll, he had the answer to the question that had bothered him. The secret of being happy in such bad situations is other people. And that's my story. Unless I forgot to say they were feeding the people across the table from them. Did I forget that?
Well, I would agree with the person who said that was probably the Christian missionaries that took that to China from what you would call the old world. I've heard that in the Christian circles. It's quite a well-known story in the Christian circles. But I would quote a famous philosopher we have in Northern Ireland that John and I both know very well. His name's Billy Connolly.
Oh.
And he was over in Northern Ireland, and he said that there was too many Protestants, too many Catholics, and not enough bloody Christians. Okay, but if you know who Billy Connolly is, you'll know I've changed one word in all of that. Now there's we got 3 left, so there's 2 Mikes and there's a John. So I'm going to tell a little story, and then we'll go to Mike Flaherty, and then he's going to tell a little story. Then we're going to finish off with a couple of poems, are we, John? Right, okay. So I'm going to tell a little dragon story, because in living as close as I do from Wales, we know an awful lot of things about Welsh dragons. Now, the Welsh dragon's always red, and the English dragon's always white. And sometimes the Shropshire and the Welsh Marsh ones that straddle both sides, they can be green. But this is a Welsh one. So the dragon in this story is very Welsh. And he lived in a little village up in the hills. And every morning he used to come down before the postman came, and he used to go and light all the fires. So he'd stick his head in the house and he'd go, boop, and the fire would light in the grate. And he'd go to the blacksmith and he'd go, boop, boop, and the fire would light. And he'd go to the pub and he'd go, boop, 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 and that would be the 3 fires. And he'd go to the hotel where people were staying, and he'd look around the rooms, and if there were people in the rooms, he'd go, boop, through the windows and boop here and boop here. And he went right the way around the village. And all the children, because they didn't have to cut all the kindling up, and they didn't have to light the fires, which is what they had to do in those days, they were so pleased. They used to leave little cakes out for him every morning. So every time, now you know about Rudolph the reindeer at Christmas, how you leave a little bit of carrot out and stuff like that. Well, for a Welsh dragon, you leave just a little bit of sugar because they've got the sweetest teeth of all. So you leave a little cake. And he used to come round, he'd light the fire and he'd eat the cake. And in the summer, when they didn't want any fires, he was their pal anyway, so they used to leave him cakes anyway. And all was good in the world. Until one day, over a shop that had become vacant, a new fellow work came in from afar. And he put a big sign over the top of his shop and it said, "The Matchmaker. 100 matches for 1 penny." And everybody looked at him and went, "That's cheap. 100 matches for 1 penny. Perhaps we don't have to light the fire in the mornings anymore. We could light the fire in the afternoons." They all thought of a reason. And so they all went and bought the matches. And when the dragon came the next morning, there wasn't any cakes outside. And they didn't need him to light all the fires. And his heart was so sad. Because dragons are very egotistical and they take things personally. And a tear came from his eye. As it came from his eye, it landed. And just as it landed, like all the tears of all the dragons in the world, a little white flower came up and stood there. And as you went down the middle of the little villages that evening, all you could see in the middle of the road were little white and red flowers, and sometimes blue ones, coming out of the middle of the road. And there wasn't a dragon to be seen. And the next day it happened, and the next day, and the matchmaker, he was soon running out of matches. So he did the things that all Tories do. Now, Tories are a political party over there. These are the right-wing ones, okay? Because he turned around and said, well, you won't get 100 matches for a penny. You're going to get 50 matches for a penny. And then suddenly they were using all the matches up. And the dragon, he wasn't there at all. And the little flowers, they'd faded. And suddenly he turned around and said, you're only going to get 25 matches, but it's going to cost you 2 pennies. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, you're only going to get 10 matches. It's going to cost you 5 pennies. And in the end, he turned around and said, you can have 1 penny each, and it's going to cost you 10 pennies. And all the villagers, they all got together, and all the children, they were sad as well. And they turned around and goes, well, what happened to our friend, the dragon? And they said, well, he's up in his cave, and he's really, really sad, and he can't, and he cries an awful lot now. So all the children, they all went up to the cave, and they all went and found the dragon. And around the dragon, he was sat there, and he was so hard, tired, and so afraid, and so unloved, that every time a tear would come from his eye, a little white flower would come up. And every time he came out from his other eye, another little white flower would come up. And he was sat in his cave, and there were flowers and flowers and flowers and flowers and flowers all over. And the saddest dragon you've ever seen. So they said to him, we're sorry. We're only human beings and we get things wrong. And we've got this wrong, and we really do love you. And we shouldn't have done what we did. And we want you to come back, please. Would you come back, please, dragon, and just be our friend? And the dragon, he said, are you sure? And they said, yes, we're sure. We want you to come back. The old ways were better than the new ways. And they held his paws and they brought him out, and they all went back down into the little village. And through the little village, he stood there and he turned round and he looked, put his head through the window, went, pop, and the light fired. And he went to the hotel and he went, pop, 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 and 3 lights, 3 fires came up. And he went to where the blacksmith was, and he went, boop, and a great big fire came up. And to all the houses, they had all the fires were lit. And the children, they came and they gave him a great big box of cakes. And they said, take that, but please come back every day, because we love you. And we promise never, ever to have a match in the village, ever, ever again. So they tell a story. Now, if you need, you know where to need, you have to know where to go. And so I'll give you the directions now. Because you follow the little village up to the left and you go over to the bridge. Then you go past where the dead hedgehog died a few years ago, and you go past to the great tree they fell over 100 years ago and isn't there anymore. And you look up into the sky and you'll see two mountains, and between two mountains there's a little hole, and you go over that little hole and you go down to where the lake is. There's a little village. And every morning before the postman comes, all the fires are alight. And if you're lucky, you know where the dragon is. Now, so we're going to go to Mike next, and then we'll finish off with John. How about that?
Thanks, Mike. I had come along to listen, but following your dragon story, I would love to do a little trio of Nasruddins, if that's acceptable. Because you know you can never just do one Nasruddin, that would be awful. So one day, Hussein came across his friend Nasruddin standing on the walls of the town, and Nasruddin was blowing cumin powder out from the walls. Hussein said, "Nasruddin, what are you doing?" Nasruddin said, "Don't interrupt, I'm busy." He said, "No, but what are you doing?" He said, "I'm keeping the dragons away." And Hussein said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, dragons can't stand cumin powder." And he said, "But we don't have any dragons here." He said, "See, I told you, it works."
Yeah.
The next one is the tax collector, alas, had fallen into the river where, weighed down with his tax collecting money, he was struggling to get out. And people all along the bank, I don't know why, because it was the tax collector, but they were saying, "Give me your hand, I'll help you out. Give me your hand, I'll help you out." And he was nearly drowning. He wouldn't take anyone's hand to help him out. He said, "Please, please," they're saying, come, give me your hand, I can get you out." And Nasruddin said, "Let me through." He said to him, "Here, take my hand, I'll get you out." And the tax collector gripped on and got pulled out of the river. And they said, why did he give you his hand? He didn't give me his hand. He's a tax collector. He took my hand. He wasn't ever going to give anyone his hand. And then there was Nasruddin, as was so often with Nasruddin, was walking along with nothing in his pockets, no money, nothing to rattle together. And he saw a blind beggar, and the beggar was sitting at the edge of the street, and he had a little plaque, and it said, "I am blind, please give me some money." And everyone was walking by. And Nasruddin, he felt awful because he had no money to give, and he wanted to do something. So he said to the blind beggar, "Would it be all right if I write something on your little card? And that should help you." And so the beggar says, "Yes, by all means, please, I could do with something, I'm getting no money." And Nasruddin wrote on his card, and suddenly the blind beggar could hear coin falling into his bucket, and more coins and more coins. And he said to one of the passers-by, "Please, can you tell me what's written on my card?" And the person said, "Yes, it says, 'It is spring and I am blind. Please give me some money.'" That's my story.
Yeah. So Nasruddin was walking past a brand new school, and they built a brand new school, and it was just opposite one of the estates in the middle of the city, where there was the roughest estate of all, where no one was used to education and everything. And the headmaster wanted to try and encourage the kids to come into his school. So he turned around and put a big sign on the gates of the school, and he said, "Trespassers will be enrolled." Right, John, over to you.
Well, we'll stay with education because I'm in about 2 weeks' time. I'm doing I'm storytelling a circus camp for children, for home educated children. So this is called Free Range. Free ranging children, free ranging hens. Neither species flourishes locked up in pens. Barns without daylight, schools without fields. You can't save the flavour of what field freedom yields when a timetable specifies when chickens should lay or children sit at desks for most of the day. It's a foul situation down at the farm. Likewise, academists, privatised palms being greased by ideologues running the money uphill, training the next generation to keep quiet and keep still. And so to make it lighter, this is just bag. And most of us have got some bag or other that we just keep using over and over again. It's an old bag, a worn through the sides bag, a frayed canvas bag, a proper road bag, a full of memories bag. But why don't you throw that thing out bag? It's what's this I found at the bottom bag? I wonder how long this strap will hold bag. I lost more times than I can remember bag. A really useful bag. A kicked around the floor bag. A time I put it in the wash bag. I'm sure I can squeeze one more thing in bag. I swear I put it in there bag. It's a back in style every 10 years bag. A vintage bag. It's my bag. And with that, thank you, Mike.
Right. Well, I think that's
I
then
think
we're going to
that's
call
everyone,
it for
isn't
tonight
it?
then. That's an hour and a half. So we've done it. So thank you very much for coming here. And Melanie, it's lovely to see you again. And to Stella and to Moria, who both came for the first time. That was really, really nice of you. And the old faces, I can't do this without you coming and telling me stories, and I love to do it. And the sun's just beginning to fade a bit, and I'm getting a bit cold, so I'm going to call it tonight. And Stella, I hope you come back to do it, see us all again. John, I'll hand it back to you, mate.
Well, then like I say, we've got our next one of these on June the 4th, 2 weeks' time. This Tuesday, and every Tuesday, we have our Young International Tellers, where anyone under the age of 25 can come on and tell a story in any language they like. So if you know of any young people who want to come and tell a story, it's exactly the same as this. They just click on the gold join story button and they get in. And we have children from Ponjo, from Gaza, from Nigeria, Italy, all over. And then on next Friday, we've got Deborah Weller telling our stories for children, which is magnificent. And then it all starts again with Tuesday, the young tellers, etc., etc. And so we hope to see you all again. Keith, it's so good to see you after a gap that was not of your making, but of ours. There was just too many bank holidays this month.
Yes.
There's we nearly got to sort of continental Europe number of public holidays this month. Which I think is, you know.
And we have a new king. And we have a new king.
Yeah, we got a new chap on the throne.
We got a new chap on the throne.
So, but it's been wonderful to see you. Good night, everyone, and thank you, Waleed, as always.
Yeah, thank you, Waleed. Thank you very much, mate. I know you're not there.
No, he might be to come and turn us off.
He'll come and turn us off.
If no one's sending him up and down those stairs with silver trays full of mint tea and wonderful and smoothies.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to being back there one day, but not just yet. Okay, see you all next time, fellas.
See you then. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Next time, good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. See you soon. See you Tuesday, John.
Bye.
Absolutely. Right.